I am Catherine Van Arendonk, and I am so thrilled to welcome you to Vulturefest and to this Northern Exposure reunion. I'm so excited. I can barely contain myself. It is a long-held dream of mine to be doing some kind of conversation like this. So I would love to be able to introduce our fantastic participants. We have Rob Morrow, we have Cynthia Geary, we have Janine Turner, we have John Corbett, and we have Barry Corbin. Can everyone say hi?
Howdy.
Oh,
Hi. So great to see everyone. This is the most beautiful cast ever. Look at these beauties. Oh my
God. Because this is Northern Exposure, I did want to try to get in one additional special guest. If you'll I have a moose here with me. I'm going to put his headphones on so that he can hear the conversation.
That's Morty's offspring.
Yes, the moose was named Morty. Yes, Morty.
Yeah,
and
Morty, but he's dead, by the way. So that must be his son.
Yes, this is a long lost Morty descendant. He's thrilled to join us today. So I wanted to thank you so much for being here, everyone. And I wondered if we could just start off by, if I could ask you whether any of you remember your auditions for this show and what they were like. Rob, do you remember your audition?
Oh yeah, I mean, I had a number of auditions. First in New York and for Josh and John, and then they flew me to LA and I read for the studio, and then they brought me to CBS for what they call the test, and that's where I met Janine, and it was in the basement of CBS Television City on Fairfax. And I went in and there was like, I don't know, 6, 7 girls and 2 guys. So I knew my odds were pretty good. And as the day went on, they started to pair away people and the guy was left pretty quick. And so it was just me and a bunch of girls, including Janine. And eventually it was Janine and I, and we went in and instantly had a kind of natural rapport. And I obviously thought she was beautiful. And the best part of it was when we left, we were the last 2 standing, right? And these things are weird. They're in a basement studio with network executives, sitting in like theater seats, saying nothing to anyone. They're just kind of blank poker face. And so we left, but we were the last 2. So I felt pretty confident. And I got in the elevator with Janine to go up, and I turned to her and I said, it's you and me, kid. And she looked at me and gave me this look because she thought I was trying to pick her up.
Janine, you thought he was trying to pick you up?
She told me later. But sure enough, I got back to the hotel and I got the call and they said, you got it. And at that point, I'm 10 years in debt. I got up on the bed. It was in what was the Mondrian Hotel. I don't know if it's still called that. I got up in the bed and jumped up and down for like 10 minutes, just screaming, I'm out of debt. I'm out of debt.
Janine, you did think he was hitting on you?
Oh, actually, I don't recall. I remember vividly being in the elevator with Rob. And of course, I remember the audition like yesterday. I don't recall thinking he was hitting on me. I was probably just so incredibly nervous about whether I was going to get the job or not, because I was sort of at the end of my rope. I'd started in New York City at 15. I was now 27. I had $8 left in my name. I was depressed. And it was one of these like, will I ever get it? And I auditioned in New York City as well. And it was funny because the casting director said to me, and she wasn't a high level casting director, so I don't want to put the casting director on the spot, but whoever was saying hello to me that day said, I don't know what these producers are doing. We saw all of New York City's best talent last week. Oh. So I was like, oh, okay. And so I was so depressed at that moment. I didn't even know if I could walk in. And since 3 years old, I've been performing. But I had my sister-in-law with me who had flown up to give me some moral support and just in life, not for the audition. And so she went in the room with me. And afterwards, I walked down, John and Josh were not there. It was just an audition and with a camera. I walked down Park Avenue just crying. I can't act. I just give it up. Oh, and my sister-in-law looked at me and goes, I thought it was pretty good. So by the time I got to LA, I was just, and then I almost didn't get it because I wore a skirt. I was
What?
afraid I'd look fat. Yeah, I wore a long plaid skirt because I thought I looked fat in jeans. So when I went in, Josh comes running out and said, "Why are you wearing a skirt? Why are you wearing a skirt? They think you're too pretty to be a pilot." And I'm like, "Oh my God." So I just walked in, and I remember I took the chair. I thought, it's an inside job. It's an inside job. I took the chair and I turned it, backwards, and I just straddled the chair as if I were in jeans, and did the audition with Rob, and there you have it. So I was with Rob. I was just like, please let me get this job. And chorus line, I need this job.
So. Cynthia, do you remember your audition?
Oh, of course I do. So this was my first pilot season. And, I kind of had the lucky Hollywood story, and I had never auditioned for a pilot before. And I was literally waiting tables at the time. And I got this audition, and originally the character of Shelley was a Native American. And I read it and I went, why am I going to go? I'm going to get fired from my job. But I went because my agent had sent me on literally like 40 auditions. I hadn't gotten to the point of going to network yet, but I'd been on so many auditions, I thought my agent was going to drop me. So I went anyway, and I went in apologizing to the casting director at Universal Studios, Megan Brandman, and was like, I know I'm not a Native American. And then she's like, oh, we've changed it. We've already hired 2 brunettes, Rob and Janine. And I was like, okay. And subsequently, I had like 5 auditions in 2 days, with more and more people came to the audition, Josh and John, and more people came. And I ended up going to the basement of CBS, like Rob described. And Corbett was there and John Cullum was there. And for us, there was only 2 people for each character. So it was me and another actress that I knew was going for the part. So that was nerve-wracking and scary. I mean, the basement, there's no windows, and you watch all the suits file in, and they sit in this auditorium, and they, like Rob said, they don't say a word. You hear nothing. I did my audition. I left and went back to, I now had a new waiting job because I got fired for not showing up at work through all these auditions. So
no.
At another Italian restaurant, they wouldn't even let me take orders. I had to follow the waiter around. And, if they asked me for water or something, I'm like, oh, no, sorry, I'm in training. And so I kept calling my agent saying, have you heard anything? No. It went over the weekend. So the whole weekend, I didn't know if I got it or not. And finally they called and they said, you got it, which I was thrilled, because it meant I didn't have to wait tables. I had no clue what it really meant. I was just happy I didn't have to wait tables for a month. I got moved to Seattle, had never been here before. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I'm still here because I love it. I live on a lake that our studio was in a warehouse at the end of this lake. Obviously, it was good for me because I didn't want to leave. That's my story.
Oh, Barry, do you remember when you auditioned?
Oh yeah. I knew they were seeing every old bird in California, so I figured I better do something a little different. I went in and did push-ups all during my audition.
You did push-ups?
Ex-Marine and ex-astronaut, so I just went in and did a bunch of push-ups. Said my lines while I was doing push-ups. And then I got up and said, thank you, gentlemen. And I left. Went and did another pilot. And they called me to come in to meet the network. And I was down in Marathon Key in Florida, wading around in the swamps, playing a swamp rat. And I said, well, I can't meet him. They said, you got to meet him tomorrow. And I got a contract with these folks here. I got to honor that. I can't be hauling off and going back to California. And So I never did meet the network. And probably if I had, I wouldn't have got the job.
That's amazing. I think doing push-ups during your auditions is a fantastic tip for any young aspiring actors.
Well,
John,
sometimes I do 100 without stopping, but I can't do that.
John, do you remember your audition? Also,
Yeah,
please tell us about what you're wearing.
This is an original Chris in the Morning shirt from the show. Original head. This is my first headband and my go-to headband.
You look exactly the same.
Yeah. I sleep in an ice chamber just because I want to look just like I did 30 years ago. My story is exactly a carbon copy of Cynthia and Rob's. I had done the Wonder Years in '88, and that was it. And was almost ready to quit acting. I would introduce. My job was for 2 years when I got the show. I worked at a place in Hollywood called the Magic Castle, and I would introduce magicians all night long, 6 nights a week. That's what I did. And I had to quit that job that I loved to go when I did get the show. But I had never, also like Cynthia, never auditioned for a network before. And I remember sitting next to John and getting really in-depth conversations as we would go through this process. And John would tell me about, his relationship with his son that wasn't working out. And it was very intense, and it took my mind off all the pressure. But the cool thing is, I remember when I did get the job flying to Seattle, I heard this voice going, "Well, how are you doing, darling?" And I looked, and it was the guy from War Games, right? Sitting over there, Barry Corbin in Urban Cowboy, one of my favorite movies. And I thought, what the hell is he doing on this plane? I didn't know, I didn't talk to him. So when I finally got to the studio and met everyone, Barry was there. So I was overjoyed.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thinking about, I think audiences started watching the show maybe thinking it was going to be a medical show, not really knowing what it was going to be. And then at some point, there's a moment when you're like, oh, actually, this is a very weird, different kind of show. I'm curious what that moment was for you guys, participating in the show, reading scripts. If there was a moment that you can remember, like looking at a script or being in a scene and thinking like, this is the weirdest show I have ever I've never seen a show like this. Rob, was there a moment like that for you?
Well, first, I just want to say I'm wearing Joel Fleischman's ring, which I have, which is Columbia Med. It's actually from Columbia University, MD. It says, I don't know if you probably can't see it, but it says like MD, and then inscribed, which you definitely can't see, is Dr. Joel Fleischman.
Amazing.
Oh, right. That's cool.
I don't, the show, the weirdness, I never thought of it as weird. I mean, I thought when I read the script originally, I had at that point been reading a lot of TV shows, and it read like no TV show I'd ever read, but not in terms of weirdness, in terms of being cinematic. It had a spareness, and it had a kind of, it had this kind of, it dealt with landscape, which TV shows just don't deal with. And I remember thinking, this is like a movie. So the weirdness it came and went, it didn't, but I never thought of it as weird. I just thought it was idiosyncratic and different.
Yeah. Anyone else? Were there any moments that really sort of struck out sort of early in the show as being really particularly unusual or noteworthy?
Well, I just remember being in the read-through, the very first read-through, and how incredibly special that was. And when Darren Burroughs was reading what he was reading, and John Corbett and Rob and Cynthia and Barry and John, it was and John and Josh were there, our creators. It was really special. But what I remember, when I knew the show was going to be different, was when Joshua Brand said, yeah, we're going to do the opening credits, and we're going to have a moose walk through the opening credits. And he said, the network's freaking out, and they just don't want us to do it, but we're going to have a moose walking through the opening credits. I knew then it was going to be a different type of show.
Mind you, they had to. The only way they could film that sequence was they had to fence in the entire town because you can't train a moose. So that was the only way they could film it. And then they just let it go and just picked off shots where they could.
A free for all.
Yeah.
A moose free for all. So I have actually here a book, which I don't know if anyone has seen before, but this is a book that Rob made. Oh, Cynthia, you have one too.
I think I have the original. Like, this is, I think, what I submitted.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
This is the.
And I think there's a bunch of pictures that aren't even in there.
Wow. Well, so one thing I wanted to ask about is one of the things that you say in this book, Rob, is that Cynthia and John, you say, are sort of the most different from their characters. And I wondered, Cynthia, if you felt that way, if Shelley felt very different than you, or if that was sort of a stretch or something you had to get into.
Yes. Shelley was different from me, but she is a part of me. I mean, that innocence is me. And I never felt like I was acting, which was the beauty of that show. I don't think we were all so comfortable in our characters that it just felt real and natural, and especially, with all these amazing actors that I got to feed off of and learn from. John Cullum, that I worked with every single day, made it so easy that I just believed it. And I mean, Shelley is certainly me. I mean, in a lot of ways, I felt like that coming from Mississippi in a very sheltered upbringing, and never really being in Hollywood. And I got cast in my first pilot season, so I didn't do the Hollywood thing. And so I drew on that a lot. I mean, there are obviously differences. I mean, I went to college and I did and had other experiences, but I think, I still feel like I'm very innocent, believe it or not.
I did want to look at a couple of pictures from the book I can hold up, and then we'll also display. So Cynthia, this is you wearing some kind of post-apocalyptic costume here. And it is one that it's an episode where the entire town, I think, it goes into like a post-apocalyptic dystopia.
Well,
that
was so great, and I want everybody else to chime in. But I mean, when you were asking about when you knew about if the show was different, the things we got to do on this show, I look back now and I realize how lucky and fortunate we were, because I mean, we didn't play the same character for 6 years. We had so much opportunity to do all these dream sequences. I mean, there was the episode where I sang the whole episode because I was pregnant, and then I was Rob's New York lawyer wife in an episode, and all of these great in this apocalyptic episode. I mean, you got to play all these different characters and do all these incredibly original creative things at Sicily, when we went back to Sicily, and when the town was founded. And so I now realize how incredibly lucky I was.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
Yeah. I have also, this is a picture of John in that same episode, in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, but Sicily.
Wow.
Yeah. John, you look like you're really enjoying a picture of some kind of beverage there. I don't know.
I probably was enjoying some sort of beverage. But the cool thing is Rob was always taking photos, and he would just show up and hand you, 5 or 6 really great, usually black and white photos that he had taken. And there's so many people on a set, 50 or 60 people, that you sort of just tune them out after a while. And I've never even really noticed him taking photos. So you'd see these you know, we all know what we're like when we're posing for a photo, but to get one from the side or the back, or when you're fixing your hair in a mirror, they were just very cool things. I still have all mine. They're very cool.
Really? Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have, speaking of the Sicily episode, I don't know, I can't remember which one we have queued up next, but this is John and Barry in,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I love that picture.
yeah. Yeah, and so this one looks like, to me it's so good because it's a film shot, and you're dressed as though you have gone back 100 years, and the photo looks as though it could have been an archived like photo from 100 years. Barry, I don't know if you have any memories of sort of unusual versions of your character that you got to play, because your character had so much. He had so much depth and so many interests. I wonder what of those different sort of unusual episodes really stuck out to you.
Well, somebody once asked me what I have in common with Maurice Minifield, and I said, we talk alike and we look alike, and that's where we draw the line. There's nothing else that I have in common with him. But no, I liked all the mix-up things. I liked that episode where we played going back into Sicily, because I got to ride a pretty good horse in that. Of course, he was an undisciplined thing. I had to keep having crew members run back and forth in front of him so he'd keep his mind off of the mares. And I told them not to bring any mares out, and they brought out 3 mares. And he tried to mount them when somebody was on the other mare. I was in makeup. He said, the AD said, you got to go to makeup and quit messing around with that horse. I said, are you sure? I said, yeah. So I went to makeup, and they had some young woman get on the horse, and he went over and found that mare, and he climbed up on her, and the person that was on the mare had to get off real quick.
Oh, wow.
They came into the makeup trailer and said, you've got to go out and take care of your horse. I said, it ain't my horse. So I had to go out and straighten him up, put him on somebody, let him dodge back and forth. But they made me get on his son, and his son had never learned how to back up.
Oh boy!
And we'd already shot one shot where I backed him up and turned him around. So I said, well, you got to give me about 15 minutes, and I took him around back, taught him how to back up.
So you were a horse trainer also.
Hear him squeal.
Barry and I used to ride horses together.
Right.
Can y'all
remember
hear
the
me?
house we shot in first? That was your house, and we were shooting. They hadn't built the set for his house in the first season, and Barry and I were shooting in what was his house. We went upstairs in the balcony. It was like all this like pro-Nazi paraphernalia.
Oh wow.
It was like the weirdest thing. We were like, holy, where are we shooting?
That fella owned that house. I got to be kind of friends with him. He always went around with at least one pistol on, and probably 2, one of them hidden. And he was not the most trusting individual in the world.
Well, Barry used to practice his roping all the time, and we'd be standing by our trailers, and you'd have to watch out because Barry would rope you and lasso you on the way to the set.
Yeah, I'd heal him as they go in.
Janine, I have this picture also of you in this wedding dress.
Ooh.
Oh
yeah.
Yeah.
Which is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Can y'all see me?
Yeah, I think I can see you. Your connection's been blipping in and out a little bit, but we can see you now, I think.
Well, I keep losing battery on my iPad, so I'm going on my phone. But can you see me now? Can you hear me?
We can see you. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah, that was a very special show, and I did want to comment on two things. One is Barry and I used to ride horses together, so we both arrive. I had my black pickup truck. This was my Western phase, and we'd arrive with our spurs, and so Barry and I had a good time with that. And I was doing a People magazine shoot once, and I got reared off my horse in a nightgown, which was really interesting. There's a painting of that now. And also I have one of Rob Morrow's pictures too on my piano that he took. It's like a side view of all of us sitting in our director's chairs with our fur hats and waiting for our scene to take place. So that's a lot of fun. And in regard to that particular show, I just agree with Cynthia that their show was never, ever, ever boring. It was completely stimulating. Whether I had to speak Russian or I was a Native American in an igloo and had to go stick in me glue, and I had red Nike tennis shoes or I was on the bed in a pilot's outfit with my, my scarf flying in the air, stepping over Fleischman. So there were all the flashbacks, I think, made it really, really, really fun because they could do a lot with those flashbacks.
Great. So, it's fascinating talking about all of the like horse wrangling and all of the things that you had to do as sort of other versions of your characters. Janine, one thing I was thinking about as I was looking at this photo of you, you're so gorgeous in it. But I also know that there was an interview that you gave earlier where you were saying sort of how appreciative you were that Maggie was like a real 90s girl, that she flew a plane and she could fix all of her own stuff. And I just wondered if you could talk to me a little bit about looking back, what it meant to play a character who felt against type in a lot of ways, for like what women on TV were supposed to be.
That's a wonderful question, and it's very true, and it's hard for say millennials or my daughter to appreciate today what it was like in the late 80s and the early 90s, 1990s when we started this. There were very few really strong characters on television. So many of my auditions were just, bathing suits, or I was kidnapped and, I was always the victim. So it was, I moved to New York City from Los Angeles because I wanted to have serious roles. And I, got a method acting coach and did everything I could because I didn't want to just be in bathing suits and be the victim, and I was really blessed with Northern Exposure. It was just a gift from God. And she was one of the first really, really strong characters on television. I don't know of anyone like her. We had Mary Tyler Moore, but you didn't have someone who fixed their own airplane or fixed the plumbing, was the landlord, shot her own deer, fixed her hair.
No, I mean, I think so she fixed her own airplane. She was so capable, and it really created this sense that she was more, she was not just like a love interest, which was, I think, really interesting. I think Shelley similarly was this character who we meet her as Holling's girlfriend, but she becomes so much more than, just like she's just like a little waitress to start. I wonder how Cynthia, if you could talk a little bit about sort of her arc over the series and whether you had input in it, whether that was sort of meaningful for you.
Sure. When I read the character, in the pilot, I said nothing, and I was, what Janine was describing. I was supposed to be the 18-year-old beauty queen who came with Barry actually to town and then dumped John. But it's all the writers and our creators, Josh Brand and John Falsey, and I wish I could say that I had something to do with it, but it was their writing, their genius, and I was just fortunate enough to be a part of it. And I do think that one of the lucky things about being on a television series is that the writers get to know you, and your character grows if they're really good writers and it's a well done show. I mean, you can, on all these series, they take what the actors give them and we grow together. And I feel like they would give me one little bit of something to do and that would go well. And then I'd get something bigger and bigger. And by the, third or fourth season, I'm having episodes that center around me, where I really can have things to sink my teeth into. And again, it's just so fortunate and lucky. And I just am grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Hey, Johnny, was that a Northern Exposure mug you just picked up?
That was my mug, my only mug that I used. And a lady sent it to me from the Muskingum Museum of Art, and this is the main one I used on the show.
Wow.
It's
I'd be in the radio station.
Yeah.
Cynthia has one.
These are gifts from our production designer, Woody Crocker, who's passed away. But every season, this was season 6, the last season, he would give us these mugs, and I drink out of them every day. It makes me happy. I think about you every morning.
That's so nice. Did anyone else take interesting stuff? I think, John, you said that you took quite a bit from the set afterwards.
I got everything. I mean, I got this guy here.
Wow.
That's Esau. I mean, I got everything. This was from the motorcycle that I flung over the cliff. I got this from the piano. I flung the piano. This is the nameplate. It's from New York with little things.
Wow.
I got my sword when I gave the big speech. I gave a big old speech. Yeah, I got lots. I got this thing. Look how cool this is. Remember when Barry made a tribute to himself in a wax figure? Look at that guy, man. I got the head. I got my radio console board, my on-air sign, the mic. I stole all that stuff. Woody actually let me take it because we had the town. We had 2 sets. We had one in the studio where I could do some radio stuff, and the one way out in town. So I stole everything from the set. I have that in all my clothes and just everything, man. Everything. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious. I mean, you took everything. Rob was out sort of taking photos of everything all of the time.
Yeah.
And Rob, I think you have dailies, right? You also have dailies from the show still?
I actually do. There must be in storage, but I have, early on, I got in my deal that they gave me a copy of the dailies every day. And so for 5 years, it became my film school, but I have them somewhere, and they're great because there's so many. John Corbett could make me laugh for hours on end, and there's so many outtakes of like even over behind my back, and you see me going like this because he's making me laugh.
You would have to produce a blooper reel.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
At some point. I mean, there's definitely a trove of stuff there, but I don't. I think legally I'd be in a kind of weird position to show them or anything.
Sure. I mean, I think we're broadcasting this out to the world, and so I just want to use this as an opportunity to say, anybody watching, please help us with this legal problem, because I think the world needs it. But I'm curious. It feels like as you were making the show, you were sort of keeping things from it. You were taking all these photos. I'm curious how you knew it was something that you really wanted to memorialize. Like, what was it about the show and the experience of making it that made you really feel like you wanted to keep all of these things? I mean, John, it seems like you have most of the set in your house at somewhere.
Yeah, I do. And I even have, I'll just say it, I stole, when you would come into Barry's house, which was a set, he had stuffed heads everywhere. And I actually stole a moose head out of when everyone was having lunch, because we knew we weren't coming back. I stole a giant moose head that's in my living room, hanging on the wall, that they came to lunch one day and said, listen, somebody stole the moose head that we've rented. And if it doesn't show up, They made the speech to everyone. If it doesn't show up, we have to pay $20,000. Now, is this some kind of joke? Please come. Everybody stopped. And I was the only one. I took it out, and there was a graveyard next to our warehouse. And I tied a rope around this thing, and I pushed it up and lowered it over the graveyard and then drove my truck into the graveyard. That's how I stole it. Nobody ever knew that I took this thing.
So wait.
Yeah.
Well, they know
I
now.
just knew everything. What? Yeah. I think I've escaped the statute of limitations. But I just knew this was a special show. I even told Rob. See, Rob left the show earlier than the show ended, and I remember I said to him, "Hey, man, get yourself some things to remember this show by." And I remember Rob said, "There's this object on my desk that I think I'm going to take." Rob, do you remember that?
I do. I have it. It was a great thing. It was great advice.
Yeah.
I'll say that I don't know. I wasn't conscious of memorializing, but I was conscious of how beautiful these people were that I was working with, and visually it was so lush. Aside from them being beautiful, the costumes made them more eccentric and interesting, and the sets were fascinating, and the light in the Northwest, and it was just such an incredible visual feast that I'm a photographer as a serious hobby. It just was like, it was a no-brainer because I was getting all these images, as you can see from the book, that were so unique. But I was definitely conscious of what an extraordinary group of people I was getting to go on this journey with, for sure.
I want to do a series of sort of faster questions. So I think we'll sort of go around. We can start with you, Cynthia. What was the hardest episode or scene for you to shoot?
Oh gosh, and now it's supposed to be fast. The hardest.
Well, it doesn't have to be. Don't feel pressure. I'm not,
Well, technically hard. I would probably have to go to the episode where I sang every word, because we experimented with doing it live, and then I recorded it in a soundstage, and then I kind of matched it, and I think they used a combination of both, and we didn't know exactly how it was going to work. But it wasn't hard. It was fun and awesome. I mean, I the whole time felt like, again, I keep repeating myself, but I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I get to do this. It was great.
Yeah. Barry, do you remember? I mean, you had to teach a horse to go backwards. That seems hard to me. Was there any other particularly hard episode for you?
Well, that one wasn't particularly hard, but
really?
The hardest thing to do was to go in that water when I had to dive off the cliff. That water came off a glacier.
Oh boy!
It was just a little bit above freezing, and I made the director sign a note saying that he would support my children until they were grown if I died a heart attack in this water.
Yeah.
I said I was going to do it one time. I said, I'm going to go under this water one time. I'm going to come out, and you better have the camera right where it needs to be, because that's it. And they did, fortunately.
That's good. Janine, what was the hardest for you to shoot?
Well, I'm thinking about all the different opportunities. One of the things, I think it was cold. A lot of the times it was very, very cold. But, we were wearing, I developed, people always say, you're so much thinner than you looked on the show. It's because I had fur vest underneath my actual coat. But which, I always remember Rob and I shuffling along in our Sorel boots, up and down the town. But I would think that one of them would have been acting with the dog, because Rick came back as a dog. So
the dog, your ex-fiance.
Yeah, he got hit by the satellite and died because all her boyfriends died. And that was such a great show, though, because at the end, Fleischman comes up to O'Connell and takes her hand and dances to Etta James at last, in the bar. It was a really, really great show when Rick was hit by the satellite. But I think acting with the dog was a challenge. And then just for fans, I think it'd be fun. The roll in the hay that finally Rob and I had was literally a roll in the hay. And he and I had to try to kiss and embrace as we, from a very high incline, mind you, we had to fall and roll down the hay. Remember that, Rob?
I do. Oh my God, it was amazing. We had a couple of shows that we had to kiss and crazy, like the one where we get to destroy a kitchen while we were making out.
Oh, Spring Break. Spring Break.
Right.
That was a great show too.
John, were there particularly tough scene for you?
Every show was a tough show because I had to memorize these page-and-a-half monologues, and I'd have to do usually 4 of them a show, but one would get cut because the show would be long. So we shot in this town that was 2 hours outside of Seattle, and most of the time they wanted to do my stuff at the end of the day, and I'd have to do 2 or 3 of these a show. In one shot, they'd do a really slow pan while I talked for, a page and a half. And if I messed up, I had to go back to the beginning. So the only thing keeping this whole crew from their 2-hour drive home after a 14-hour day was whether I could get through these monologues or not. So it was just a lot of pressure to memorize these things. My brain would be mush at the end of the night.
Rob, does the role of the Hague, does that feel memorable for you, or were there different scenes?
Well, there's so many memorable ones, but the one that I remember as the hardest was, it was called Jules et Joel. It was one of my favorite episodes because I got to play my twin brother. There was a new technology that hadn't been used in television yet called motion capture. Basically, they could get the camera to move and repeat the exact same movements via a computer, so that the old school kind of bewitched locked off camera where she would play her twin was now you could actually block a scene, and I had to shoot the scene with playing Joel and then a stand-in that you'd see over his back and then move around, right, and do things, and then they'd flip it, I'd switch, I'd go through the worked makeup, and they'd completely transform me, and I'd have to listen in my ear to the dialogue that was recorded and remember exactly where I had moved as Joel as I was talking. And I remember thinking, I thought my brain was going to split because it was so hard to do all those things at once.
Sure.
But it turned out really well.
Yeah.
It was a great show.
Yeah. Let's do the same round again. But I'm curious what the thing is that you most looked forward to when you knew that your character was going to have a scene with somebody, or in a particular set, or just a kind of scene that you knew you particularly enjoyed playing. I started with Cynthia last time, but I feel like I have to put you on the spot again. Sorry about that. Is that okay?
Okay. That's easy. I like mad scenes. Whenever I got to be mad at or Dr. Fleischman, it's therapy, and I used to say I was always kind of easygoing and happy in my real life because I got to be mad on camera and paid for it, and everybody thought that was great. But that was my therapy. I loved when I would get a mad scene.
Great. Janine, what scenes did you look forward to?
Well, I always loved the repartee between Fleischman and O'Connell. I thought that they were sort of like Katharine Hepburn back in the olden days. And who was it? Hepburn and
Tracy.
Yeah.
Right.
Tracy.
Thank you very much. And so I enjoyed those shows. And there was John's laughing at me. There were so I'm really stressed because my camera keeps going out, so I can't.
You're doing great. You look great.
I haven't pulled my phone. It's just so that's why my brain is like Catherine. Anyway, but he and I would have great repartee, and I remember so many fun scenes with him. We had the scene in the bar where I socked him in the nose.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the show, he threatened to sue me, and we would have all this great dialogue in the middle of the street where I'd be like, "Oh, come on, you can't take a little hit to the nose." Oh, and then there were all those flying scenes where Rob and I would have to be in the plane. So there were just so many. I love the scenes, where Maggie would. I guess I kind of agree a little bit with Cynthia, where Maggie would be just on a rant because the dialogue was so fantastic. I remember one where they would bring up Catherine the Great, and the things they would say, which I won't repeat on the air, that Catherine the Great did. I mean, the dialogue was so rich. The show was never ever boring. The dialogue was just. My favorite line was the second show, so Soapy Sanderson, or the third, where I'm really mad at Rob because he's not an environmentalist, I think, and or whatever happened. But I say, you're the most vile, odious, pernicious waste of corpuscles that I've ever had the misfortune to lay my eyes on.
Wow.
I still remember
Yeah.
that line. You're the most vile, odious, pernicious waste of corpuscles I've ever had the misfortune to lay my eyes on. So
Amazing.
I would just say it was the writing. The writing was really great.
Excellent.
But the cast too, you know, just our repartee that we all had. We were all really close.
Yeah. Barry, what did you most look forward to?
Well, anything with Diane Delano.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The episode that I looked forward to and I really enjoyed, I don't think John Cullum enjoyed it that much because we did the whole episode horseback. And John was not really comfortable horseback and he wasn't really comfortable out in the snow. But we had a good time. We had Joanna Cassidy playing a part, and we almost killed her. She had to get on the horse behind me, and I was riding a young horse, and it jumped out from under her. I thought, oh, Lord, here we go. She was all right. She got back on. But just about any of the shows were enjoyable to me. I had a good time.
John, what did you most
I remember
look
those.
forward to?
If I could just interject, I remember those shows
sure.
with Diane and how great they were. Those shows with Diane, and I remember that one of my favorite scenes was when you would iron Diane. Well, the character, what was Diane's character called? I don't remember, but you would iron her underwear. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember. Yeah. I remember a whole lot of things about Diane. She was a great person. She is a great person. I
Very funny.
I kind of talk back and forth to her on the Facebook sometimes.
Well, and just to be clear, you weren't ironing Diane's underwear. You were ironing you, Maurice,
yes.
where you were ironing her character.
Well, I was very finicky. I was a very finicky kind of a guy. That's what I mean. I didn't have anything in common with that fella. I've never ironed a thing in my life.
Sorry.
I think the juxtaposition very quickly is what made the character so great. Maggie O'Connell had been, a rich girl from Grosse Pointe who was a debutante, and now she's cut all her hair off and became a bush pilot. And everyone had that. Darren's character was from the small town of Sicily, but he loved Woody Allen. And Maurice was an astronaut, but he'd iron his girlfriend's underwear. So everyone had that dichotomy, and I think that's what made the show so great.
Yeah. Sorry, John, what did you most look forward to?
During the show, I had this contentious relationship with Maurice. We were a father and son more than anything else, and I just liked all my fun scenes that I'd get to have with Barry like that. Plus, we work in a very similar way. Which is, I don't like to really do more than 2 takes. I give my best and then I'm done. And, these directors sometimes want to keep going. And I remember one time, I think it was Rob Thompson or Bill D'Elia said to Barry, like after the second take, do you want to do another one? And Barry said, was I in focus? Yeah. Let's move on. I just liked working with Barry like that because, he was no nonsense. And, I just wanted to go home. So, down to Seattle and drink some beer after work.
Sure.
Yeah.
But John, don't you remember the flinging of the piano? And my mother came to town and burned the whole house down, burning down the house. And I had a picture of you and I. A picture of you and I on that set, and it's a burned down set. That show was amazing because the whole house had to catch on fire. We had scenes with the house on fire behind us, but then you and I with the snow covered burnt house, you're trying to figure out what to fling, and you wanted to fling a cow, but you decided to fling my burnt piano. That was
I flung your burnt piano, and besides having this thing, I had the whole insides of the piano. All the felt and the moving keys, and it probably weighed 40 pounds and was so intricate. And when I moved from Seattle, I had some movers and they thought it was a piece of junk and they threw it in the trash. And it was like it was the holy grail because it was the whole inside. It was such a great little piece of art. But I love that episode. I love that episode too. Yeah. Hey, here's
Rob,
another fun fact.
Oh yes, go for it.
when we did the pilot, they put us all in this little sort of efficiency compound out by where Cynthia lives because we were out of town. So I think that was a real bonding thing for us because for that first thing, you know, Cynthia was right across and I shared a balcony with Darren. And you guys remember that, how cool that little setup was?
It was great. It was so innocent.
I did. Yeah, it was
you know,
fun.
it's funny. John's making me think. I don't know why I said that he's not like his character. I don't remember what I was thinking of, but now he's making me think like he's most like his character. The way he's referencing all these, you know, his character was an artist who made these abstract sculptures that were so interesting. And it sounds like he's, you know, he collects all this stuff that could be art in and to itself.
Yeah, I would love to know just even how he is storing all of it, because it really seems like there's a whole.
Check this out. I even have, you guys remember this? Here's a Chris outfit. Remember this when we had a bowling team, right?
Wow.
We had the Sicily thing. Yeah, I got so much stuff. I got my brown suit from when I wasn't allowed to vote because I was a felon, my ill-fitting suit. I mean, I just kept.
And you cut your hair. You cut your hair.
I cut my hair. I got in big trouble because I didn't ask anybody. I just cut my hair.
You didn't even ask. You just cut it
into the show.
You know what else I used to do?
It's one of my favorite stories about John. It was in the middle of an episode. He had hair like this, and then on Friday, and he showed up on Monday with a crew cut. And anyone else, if I had done it, I would have gotten in trouble. But John did it, and they were like, "Oh, Johnny had a hard weekend." Okay.
I remember Michael Viddies and Rob Thompson called me into their office, and I came in. They said, "Shut the door," and I shut the door. And Rob Thompson, who was my friend, looked at me and he said, "Who the fuck do you think you are?" And I about collapsed because. No one had ever really been mean to me like that before. Yeah, it was crazy. I was stupid.
Why did you cut your hair in the first? Like you just decided to on a whim?
I just decided to. Well, here's the thing. You know, Josh and John, Josh saw me putting a headband on after my reading for the network because I rode my motorcycle over to CBS in Los Angeles. So after I was putting a headband on, I didn't wear it in the audition. So he came up to me on the set and he said, "Hey, you were putting a headband on. I like that." He goes, "Would you mind wearing a headband sometimes?" I go, "Fuck, I'll wear one all the time." And so he kind of let me do what I wanted. So then when those two guys split, he sort of let me, you know, I added all these people from being from Wheeling, West Virginia. I got to add all those people that I grew up with in my monologues, and nobody ever said I couldn't. You know, my high school principal, I got to, you know, just make it more real. So I just felt like I could cut my hair if I wanted to, and I'd never been on a show before. I didn't think it through really.
It was the middle of an episode.
I know. I know. I thought we were finished.
But they wrote it, and when you showed that suit, I remembered because they wrote it so that you showed up at the end in the new suit and your hair was cut. It really worked, actually. It worked.
It worked out.
So you know what? You did him a favor.
I did them all a favor, saved them money.
I cannot believe this, but we are pretty much out of time, which breaks my heart because I would love to hear. I have this feeling that John probably has about 20 more years of stories that we could probably hear. So, you know, text me. I'd love to know them. But as a sort of final question, I wonder if you guys could just tell me a little bit about, I think we have this sense that the show is sort of influential and groundbreaking, which I absolutely believe that it is. But I wonder if you could be a little bit specific about like what it is precisely for you about the show that you think was so important at that sort of really early like 90s moment of like what network drama was going to be like for the next 30 years. Rob, I don't know if you could sort of start as just to like, what was it about the show that was so groundbreaking for you?
Well, I touched on it before. I mean, there were a number of things, but to me, one of the most kind of salient things was that it was the landscape was a character. The town was a character. And up to then that they didn't really have that on TV and it was cinematic the way it was shot. I remember we used to fight with the network because we wanted to we wanted to broadcast it in letterbox, which was more to the cinematic aspect ratio, and they refused. Nowadays everything's that way, but I think that it really caught people's eye, and because we were filming in these locations, you know, in the middle of nowhere, these giant, you know, white snow landscapes, it just felt like you were watching a movie on a weekly basis on TV. That was, I think, a big thing.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any sort of feelings about like what specifically was really groundbreaking for you, Barry? Does the show feel like it was doing really something important and different?
Well, your chance of having a hit television show is probably about as good as your chance is to go into space and circle the Earth, because everything's got to fit. And in this particular case, the casting fit, the locations fit, the music fit, everything fit. So that's to me was the real thing about it. Everything fit, all the casting, everything.
Cynthia?
Yeah.
Well, and what I think is, I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
we were jumping in. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Of course.
Go ahead.
And I think everything on this show is groundbreaking. I mean, before Northern Exposure, I mean, yes, shooting on location, like Rob said, was cinematic and different for TV. And all the dream sequences going into people's mind, I mean, you never saw that on TV. And what we were thinking, and the one thing that really stood out to me, Rob broke the fourth wall in an episode, and spoke to the audience. I don't know that had ever been done. And I remember Josh Brand saying that he got all kinds of flack from the network saying that they couldn't do this. And, you know, and now you see that all the time. I mean, Modern Family and The Office and everybody that talks directly to the camera. But I think you were one of the first, Rob.
Yeah.
Sorry, Janine, I cut you off. Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. I didn't know if we were just jumping in. Well, I agree with what Cynthia's saying. It's the groundbreaking quality. And I'll go back to the fact that Maggie O'Connell was just a groundbreaking character. Yeah. She was so strong and didn't wear any makeup, really. You know, she was fresh. And it was always interesting to me that people considered her sexy because I was short hair, you know, parkas, snow boots. You know, I wasn't thin and necessarily, I was a little curvy, and, you know, that wasn't really hip, still isn't. And, and people loved her because she was just who she was. And they found that her essence was attractive, and but it was the no makeup, but she was just so self-efficient, and there weren't a lot of characters on. As I said earlier, Mary Tyler Moore maybe, but she was a first groundbreaking character that could kill her own deer and do that type of thing. But besides that, what I agree with what everyone's saying and what Cynthia's saying about groundbreaking aspects, but it was so beautifully written and intellectual. It was intellectually stimulating, and they were willing to take so many chances. And the reason we could do that is because we were a summer series. We were in a replacement sort of summer series. So we started out with 8, and our second series was another 8. So we didn't have to fit into that prime time slot of, like Rob was saying, where everything has to be just the way they expect it. We were allowed to have a moose in the opening credits. We were allowed to have, as Cynthia said, the dreams or all the city was so beautiful. I mean, the city, the Sicily, the town. But in closing, I'll say that it was just a place where everybody felt good. It was a place where the characters may have their differences, but you could tell that it was a place where people loved one another and cared for one another in the way that we kind of picture early America being, you know, in the colonial, you know, days. And I think that people looked after one another and accepted one another for whoever they were and whatever they, you know, Alaska's a little bit like that. People go there to kind of start their lives over. So it was something we need, I think, more on television today, which is people just, people craved it because it was just a place where everyone felt accepted.
And they also dealt with philosophy and spirituality that was never, and literature, like that never was on network TV.
Right.
Yeah, ever.
We had the first gay wedding, I think.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Really important, I think, not just formally groundbreaking, right? But sort of the content, I think, was really influential and new. John, I wonder if you could
Well,
just take us out.
I just have to say, because
Oh, yes.
fans will love this, there was an episode that was banned. Do you remember which one it was, Cynthia? Everybody? It was certain TV stations did not carry it. Does anybody remember what it was? It was about Hollings wasn't circumcised.
Oh. Wow.
And it was all about that. Do you remember that, Cynthia? And certain networks refused to carry the show that night.
Huh.
Well,
things have really changed.
My dad is a devout Catholic, and my parents are religious, and that episode bothered them immensely.
John, I just wonder if you could take us out with a couple of thoughts about what made the show groundbreaking.
Well, we would come on the air in 1990 for a few years at Monday nights at 10 o'clock. No DVR, no TiVo. Our audience would sit up till 10 o'clock and watch us till 11. And when the show ended, it left them with in a state of kind of whimsy that set them up for their whole week. I think it made them feel good, because I would have neurosurgeons come up to me and say, "What a smart, funny show." And 10 minutes later, I would have toothless trailer park hillbillies going, "Man, that's a funny show." And when you can get that group together to like a show, that's pretty magical. And I still don't know what the X factor was that made that happen.
That's what we need right now.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yes.
Let's get together.
And on that,
exactly.
yeah.
I went to Moose.
Yeah.